washes whiter than snow. Faithful love calms each fear, reaches down, dries each tear, holds my hand when I can't stand on my own. Faithful love, from above, came to earth to show the Father's love. And I'll never be the same, for I've seen faithful love face to face, and Jesus is his name. Faithful love is a friend just when hope seems to end. Welcome face, sweet embrace, tender touch filled with grace. Faithful love, endless power, living flame, Spirit's fire, burning bright in the night, guiding my way. Faithful love, from above, came to earth to show the Father's love. And I'll never be the same, for I've seen faithful love face to face, and Jesus is his name.
Wonderful, so wonderful is your unfailing love. Your cross has spoken mercy over me, over me. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart could fully know how glorious, how beautiful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Powerful, so powerful, your glory fills the skies, your mighty works displayed for all to see, all to see. The beauty of your majesty awakes my heart to sing. How marvelous, how wonderful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love, 'cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love, 'cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one
we are working through our Bind Us Together book by Dorita McDaniel, and we are in, I think, chapter 3 is where we made it to. Yes, chapter 3. We had taken a break last week while Jonathan and I were out of town, and we took our kids and Jonathan's parents. We went to the beach, and it was a really good trip. For the most part, it had some stressful moments, but it was mostly good. And so now we're back this week and ready to jump back into class. So I am going to start us off with a prayer, and then we will jump into the chapter. So please bow. Father God, we come before you this morning, and we are so thankful for this October. I know Ellen Montgomery said, "What would a world be without Octobers?" And I tend to agree with that. It's my favorite month. And it's beautiful with the leaves falling and the weather getting more crisp and down into the 40s last night. And we are so thankful for the beauty all around us that reminds us of you. We're thankful for the changes that we see. We're thankful for this class that's being able to meet, and for these sisters that are being able to fellowship together and study and grow together and encourage one another. We're thankful for the time that we just had of coffee and donut fellowship so that we could just talk and just spend time together. We're thankful for our elders that oversee our congregation here. We're thankful for your church. We're thankful for your Son who died on the cross for our sins. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So we have been talking about seeing the souls around us. Every person is a soul. And we have to actually see people that way. And it is easy sometimes for people to see other people in their church congregation as a soul, but maybe not see the person that's cranky at the DMV as a soul. Everybody's a soul. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So we're on page 48. I think we had made it about halfway through the chapter. I'm not certain if we'll get through the whole rest of the half today or not. But we're about halfway down the page, and it says, raise your soul antenna. So soul bonding requires reception. So we send and we receive. The people around us are sending out signals, and we have to receive those signals. We have to see them. And the problem today sometimes is that people don't see each other, right? You see a lot of people seeing this with their phone screen right in front of them, but not a lot of people seeing around. I know not that long ago, it was when I was pregnant with Walter, so it's been a little while, but we had a receptionist at our office. And one day I had come out of my appointment, and it was pretty obvious. She had like just some damp eyes, you know. It was obvious that maybe she had just been crying about something. And so I just asked if everything was okay, and she was like, what? Like, because people don't usually notice things like that. And so she was just so taken aback, and she did answer me. It wasn't okay. She had a mom that was in the hospital right then, and she had just kind of gotten an update, and her mom ended up being okay, but it was just a sticky situation. But she was like, wow, most people when they check out at their appointment are doing this, they wouldn't even have noticed. And she's like, and then someone who did notice wouldn't even have asked. And she was like, that was so weird that you noticed and asked. And that's how we should be, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. And I did not know her at all, this receptionist. But I don't like to see people cry, so I just thought I'd ask about it. But we have to see the people. That's the very first step if we don't see what's happening around us. But then it's not enough just to see, because we have to do something to address it. And that's kind of what she's talking about here. On the next page, she says that sometimes you might have somebody that feels a connection with you, and you might not even be feeling that connection with them. So she uses this example. She was invited to this picnic, and she decided not to go. Well, it turns out it was the wedding. The coworker was having their wedding, and they had only invited her. And because she thought it was just a picnic with that couple, she was like, I'm not going to go. I'll be like a third wheel. Well, that person had counted her as somebody important and didn't want to invite her to a wedding because didn't want all the other coworkers realizing that they were only inviting one person to the wedding. So they're like, I'll just invite you to this picnic. Well, when she didn't go, she missed the wedding. And she's like, I didn't even know I was being invited to a wedding, and I did not know this person felt that connection with me. So she says on page 49, if someone invites you, assume it's because the person wants you there, and be available and go if you can. That's a thing today. A lot of people, we were talking just before the class began, we were talking about our homes a little bit, and we said, what if our home is so messy we can't have anybody into it? And that's the way that we feel, and a lot of it has to do with the society that we live in, right? We see all these things on Pinterest and Instagram and in magazines, and the house is just perfect, like a photo shoot. And if yours doesn't live up, and face it, most people's don't, then it makes you feel like, oh, I can't have people in here, I can't have company over, which isn't true. But if we wait for the time to be just right, then it's not going to happen. And if we wait for the house to be just perfect, or we wait for there to be just the perfect food to serve, I'll do it when I have a little bit more money in my budget, when I can serve something more special, right? People say things like that, and then they don't end up doing anything in the year at all. They don't have anyone over or do anything. And you know, we talked about this in a class once when we were at a different congregation. And maybe sometimes the answer today is we don't do it at our homes. Maybe the answer is we just go to the Mexican restaurant together and have our fellowship that way, if that's what we need to do. Better to fellowship around a restaurant table than to skip the fellowship altogether. And so that's something to think of. But we have to just be available. If people don't make themselves available to one another, then those relationships can't grow. Right? If you are dating somebody and you never ever do anything with that person, then you wouldn't progress very far in dating. That's what you do when you're dating someone. You talk to them, right? You do, whether it was letters or emails or phone calls, you go places, and that furthers that relationship. And it's the same with friendships. We have to have that kind of availability, and we have to do things. The kids and I are part of a homeschool co-op. And so one day, the moms were sitting around and talking and just being like, I just wish that we could feel closer. Like, it's so hard. We get here because we're teaching class and everybody's busy. The moms don't get to talk. And one of the moms was like, well, that's because we're trying to talk in the wrong place because we all have so many kids to look after and things. And so she suggested moms' nights out. And so once a month, we go and we eat together with no kids. And it has been so nice because in that 2 hours, people are able to talk back and forth and actually say things. And another thing that we did to further relationships is now we eat lunch at co-op. And so it extended our co-op day. It put more time in for talking because there are times when we're not in class. And so the kids can talk and form relationships, and we can talk and form relationships. And it's been huge, huge, huge blessing. And it was just by tweaking and making little changes where we just made the space to be able to spend time together and things. And that is what we have to do in our church congregations. It's what we need to do when we are, if you have coworkers and you are going to form relationships with them. And sometimes people don't form relationships when they're coworkers, but if you're going to, it's because you did something. Maybe you take your afternoon break and you walk together, or maybe you eat your lunch together. Maybe sometimes I've even worked places where maybe people get there 20 minutes earlier in the morning so they can chat a little bit and have coffee before the morning starts. But whatever it is, it's an investment. It costs something from us. We have to give some time and some effort into it. She says relationships are about sharing, not about helping others. Can we help others in relationships? Sure. But if we she says, if you put on that hat to be the helper, then what you sort of have done is made yourself into more of like a teacher and student relationship where you're saying, I'm the helper, they're the one that needs my help. And she said that it can make the other person feel inferior if you're all the time acting like they need your help to do anything at all. So it's not that she's saying we don't help our friends, right? We would, obviously. But she's saying we don't try to make that our position where I'm the helper, and of course that friend couldn't possibly help me with anything ever because I have it all together. That's sometimes what people do. Some people like to be in that helper role, and some people, they seek it. They look for relationships where that's what they can do, and that's not very healthy either. So she said we need to actually not worry about setting people straight, because that can keep you from being connected. If you're all the time trying to set somebody straight and trying to help them see how it really is. So she said, instead, we can focus on listening. And listening is an active skill. It's like love. We say love isn't what you say, it's what you do. Well, listening is what you do too. Because if people don't listen actively, a lot of times people are listening with the intent of, what am I going to say next? And they're waiting for that gap in the conversation to speak whatever they need to speak. And then you're not actively listening, because you may miss a lot of things that people are saying if that's the kind of listening. But that is instinctively the kind of listening that most people give. We had a friend yesterday, and he posted a thing, and it said, it was one of those little funny memes, and it said, my wife said, haven't you been hearing what I've been saying? And it said, he said, well, that's a funny way to start a conversation. He hadn't been listening to her at all. And so sometimes we can be guilty of that, where if we're not paying attention and listening actively to what the person is saying. And I read something the other day that I really liked. It was in a thing that I was looking at, but it was saying that listening, you have to listen to the verbal things being said, but you have to listen to the nonverbal things. Because sometimes somebody can be like, I'm fine, but you can tell by everything about them that they are not fine. And so if you're listening fully, then you're going to be like, well, you look very tired or something. You're going to follow up with another kind of a question to just inquire whether that fine was just because that's kind of how we answer in our country, right?
Yes. I've heard that called biofeedback.
Yes, biofeedback, yes. And that's what the article was about, but I was just, yeah. So, but it's important, because in our country, how are you? Fine. How are you? Okay. That's the answer that everybody's looking for. They are not looking for the big, long answer. But the problem is, especially when we are Christian family, with family, you don't just say fine if you're not fine, right? You shouldn't.
When my son's called from out of state, how are you, Mom? Oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell Mom my back hurts. I don't feel good. Oh, I've got arthritis.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Well, it depends. I mean, there's a way to not, because there is a thing, people will talk about wearing your heart on your sleeve. There sometimes is an oversharing of information that can happen too. And so there's a balance, but the balance certainly isn't okay when we tip it all the way to the side of saying everything is good if really things are not very good right then. She says we need to recognize intrinsic qualities, the inside, rather than outward appearance, right? We remember with Saul, with Samuel, with David, with all these things, he was like, this one's a good one. He looks really good. And God's like, no, I can see the inward man. We're not looking at the outward man. And so that's important for God. If it's important for God to see that, it's important for us to see it. And unlike God, we can't see everything about someone's heart and mind and what they're thinking and doing. But you can see intrinsic qualities in people. You can see what makes them them. And people do recognize intrinsic qualities, right? Everybody knows who their honest friends are versus who their dishonest friends are that are trying to cheat people and things like that. So we do recognize those things, but she's like, we want to appreciate those things and make those things the most important things.
Have you made my cake?
We want to allow others to be themselves. We want to provide room for them to be who they are, where they don't have to try to pretend in a group to be something that they're not. And that's something that we've talked about in some of these other sessions, because again, in our society, there are certain expectations for things, and sometimes one thing is valued over another thing, and the people that don't possess that are looked down upon maybe. In our society, we value very much extroverted people that are loud, aggressive leaders, and that is certainly not everybody. Right? Plenty of people are not those things. And you wouldn't want them to be. Because if you looked at any given place, if you didn't have those people that were introverted and quieter, you would have a big problem if every single personality was the exact same. And so she says that we need to allow people to be themselves. We need to recognize that it's okay for some people just to be quieter. It doesn't have to be that you're a loud person for you to be a good person. And so we can recognize that. We need to value others as God created them. So what does that look like if we're actually valuing people the way that God created them?
What does it look like?
Yeah, what does it look like to value other people?
Well, we would be seeing their intrinsic qualities.
Yeah.
I look at maybe a dirty, bearded old man sometimes and I think, how would Jesus look at him?
Mm-hmm.
What would Jesus see if he looked at that man? And it changes
Yeah.
my perspective.
It does.
Well, I
It does.
passed one on the road. You could tell from the back he was carrying a blanket, and I thought, good Lord, he's homeless.
Yeah.
But what could I do?
Right.
And I kept thinking, where do they sleep? What is he going to do? I can't believe.
Well, the good news is that most communities do have something in place for our homeless. In Martinsville, we have the Martinsville Henry County Warming Center. And so they are allowed to go from sundown to sunup, and then they get fed while they're there, so they get a dinner and a breakfast.
But if the temperature at night is below 32. Or
Yeah,
32.
well, it depends, because sometimes they open it in the summer too when it's very hot out, so that they have somewhere cooler to go.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But it has to be really hot. It's not just like if it's 80 or 90, but if it's like the heat index is getting up to dangerous temperatures, then they'll open it then too. But there are usually, sometimes I know that even our police officers here will give people rides to there so that they can get there and be in a safe place for the night. And there are things, because they are given like food to take with them and things too, like non-perishables, so they'll have food for a while. I've known several people that worked there, and they were able to do some really neat things. But I know the kids and I, when we lived in Memphis and Roanoke, both especially, because their homeless are more obvious in those places, we would have blessing bags in the car, and we would have just like little toiletry items and food items, because then you can just hand it at the light when they're there, and it's safe because there's a bunch of people around, and it's just a small way to help anyway. But there are things that we can do when we see people like that. And one thing that I always think of whenever I do see homeless is how many of our homeless are former veterans, right? So many. And we know that in this country, that a huge percentage of our homeless in this country are former veterans. And so we just have to keep things like that in mind. That's thinking of those intrinsic things, because rather than seeing someone as a vagrant or whatever, we can see them as a person. And that's important to do. And so many of our other homeless that aren't former veterans are young teenagers and like young adults that are less than 20. So that's pretty much our two populations here. There's not a whole lot of other people in our homeless segments. But we have to see those people, and like I said, we have to do something to address it when we see it too. So she said God's love for us enables us to trust and to obey, to grow up, to learn who we are and what we're capable of, and to develop a relationship with God. And our friendships should kind of mimic that. Our friendships are meant to help us learn to trust. They're meant to help us be trustworthy. And if we make the right kind of friends, then they can help us grow spiritually. We can have the confidence and the courage to be able to to be the family of God and actually be a family together. And I know that in some places that happens much more naturally than here in the United States. In some places where the church is being persecuted more, the church is closer. They are a family more because they need to rely on each other. If someone is fired just because they're a Christian, then their church family will help absorb that and help to feed them and things. We know people working in a lot of other countries where it's a lot harder right now than it is here. And they have those kinds of relationships. And sometimes here we don't necessarily form those bonds as well as we should. But we have to do these things. And she says on page 50, she says, God, well, actually, she doesn't say this. Bonhoeffer says this, one of the commentaries. God does not will that I should fashion the other person according to the image that seems good to me. He made that person in his image.
How often do we try?
I can never know beforehand how God's image should appear in others. So we've heard before about people who get married and they think they're going to change that person. And does that person change? No. So we know that our goal and aim isn't supposed to be to change others. Now, does that mean that we can't help each other? If we're going to grow spiritually, are we going to change? Sure. So can you actually help someone to change? You can, but not in that way where you're going to change who they are. You can help someone, though, just like she said, grow in courage. People can be made to feel more courageous. Any person that's ever served in the military can tell you that they can be made to feel more courageous than they currently do feel. And it takes words, it takes effort on the other person's part, but it can happen, right? Because otherwise you'd have a big problem on your hands. And it's the same. Somebody was saying, I think it was Gary the other day when he was doing class, was talking about how firefighters and police officers and all these sorts of things, they have that brotherhood bond, and they can do what they need to do to get through situations when they're happening. Even if they feel like falling apart, they're not going to until it's over, because they have that kind of thing. And so in a way, you do change a little bit, because if everybody's feeling terrified, but they're encouraging one another to feel courageous so that they can push through something, then that is a little bit of change. We can encourage people to want to be better. Do parents often feel that push to be better once they have children? Hopefully, if they're good parents and they want to do right by their children, you generally hold that little baby for the first time and you think, wow, I want to be so much better than I am. And so you push yourself to do those things. And so that's the kind of thing that she's talking about. The aim of this book is to provide acts of love whereby you may stand ready to encourage others as they draw closer to God, and you can reinforce good traits as they catch glimpses of themselves, who they are, and what they have to offer. These actions of love will convey to your sister that she is visible and valuable. A lot of people in the world today don't even have that glimpse of themselves. Because if you have a glimpse, what do you have? Like, do you have the full picture if you're just glimpsing something? No. You have like a little glimmer, a little bit of a hint of the thing, and that's it. So a lot of people, that's all they have. They just have one tiny glimpse of what they could be, and they have to sometimes have a mirror on it, a light shining on it to expose even more what they could be. So if they can get an inkling of what they have to offer, then it can be developed. But they have to see that thing to begin with. And so many people today don't think that they have anything to offer. And they don't think that they are visible. They don't think others see them. And sadly, sometimes it is because others don't see them. We have children sitting sometimes in our high schools, and they can be in a class full of people, and they do not have a teacher seeing them or other students seeing them. And the same thing can happen other places. So we want to make sure that everybody in our sphere of influence is seen, that they know, hey, she sees me. We can be those people that see everyone and view them as a valuable person. And we can be the people that do that. We can encourage them. And like she said, reinforcing those good traits. How many people have realized late that they have some kind of a talent, like a math talent, maybe they go all the way through school and they don't really think that much of it. Then they have an Algebra 2 teacher that's like, you are really good at math, you should think about this. And they go into college, they become like a CPA or something, all because of one comment shedding some light on something they didn't even realize. Because when you're sitting there, you don't necessarily think of math as a big talent, or art. If somebody is good at art and somebody encourages them and says, wow, you can really do that, then that makes a difference. Those are the kinds of things that help people to do the things that they do. A lot of times, if you're talking to somebody who's something like a nurse, a lot of times they can trace it straight back to somebody being like, I remember when you took care of your dog when she was so sick and you were such a good caregiver. Wow. And they'll know that moment. A lot of my nurse friends know the exact moment where it occurred to them that they might do that as a job. And it's not, I don't have any nurse friends. I'm sure they're out there, but none of my friends I'm personally friends with became nurses because they could make so much money or anything like that. It's because somebody said something about how they cared for other people, or how they had a gentle touch, or how they, were really organized and orderly and could probably really help with this or that. So we can do those things. Our comments, our words matter so much. And we just spend them sometimes. Our words are like a currency. And sometimes, without even meaning to, you can injure and wound and harm with your words. And you can make people think very badly about themselves, even if you didn't mean to. Gary mentioned that the other morning. He said, what happens when somebody is like, I told you so. And Jan said, well, it can make you feel about this big. That's injuring people with your words. So our words matter a lot, and we have the ability to make them do good. We can be like Barnabas, the encourager. When we encourage someone, we are literally putting courage into them. That is what the word means. It means to inject courage into. And so when we encourage someone, we are giving them strength to go on and do what they need to do in life. And everybody needs that encouragement. No one will thrive very long without encouragement in their lives from somebody. So she says at the bottom of page 50, we have to get to know one another on a deep, authentic level. If you have an authentic painting versus a replica, which one is more valuable? The authentic one, the original one, the one that the artist created, is the one that's going to hang in a museum or in some priceless collection in someone's private collection. Nobody cares about the replica. That's like a poster that can be mass produced and it can hang everywhere. So you can maybe appreciate the beauty in the poster and say, wow, I so love Renoir, and the poster is still lovely, but it's not worth anything. The real one is the one that's worth something. And that's the same with us on relationships. A lot of people have kind of superficial replicas of relationships, and that relationship is just not worth as much. You might have a friendly relationship, right? We can have, coworkers that we can be friendly with, and maybe they're not our friends. You might even have a friendly, warm relationship. They hand you something and, oh, thank you, oh, please, but there's nothing there. You don't know what's going on in that person's life. You're not helping them, they're not helping you. But we can have this kind of real, authentic relationships in all kinds of areas of our life. And a lot of times, if you look at the people that have the most positivity, that have the most optimism about life, if you look at them, they have a lot of real, authentic relationships. And they have deep relationships that go beyond the shallow. And that's hard to do, though, right? Because yet again, it takes our time, it takes our effort, it's gonna cost us something. We're going to have to sacrifice to have those kinds of relationships. If you have a marriage that has deep and authentic levels in it, then sometimes you're not going to do exactly what you wanted to do, right? You're going to do something for the other person. Sometimes you're going to compromise. Sometimes you're going to put them before you put yourself. And that's kind of part of it. But you know what? She says when we have those emotional bonds and we have those deep, real relationships, we will have better relationships. They will be stronger. They will be, what is the thing, the three cords together, the strand can't be broken. We will have those kinds of relationships. We will have spiritual growth. We will have healing. How much does that matter? We can have better leadership skills, better physical health, better emotional health. We know for a fact, because science can say now, they can measure it, that if people receive hugs, it lowers their blood pressure. Without even taking any medication. If you are regularly receiving hugs, then your blood pressure automatically regulates a little bit. Now, if your blood pressure is super high, does that mean you don't need blood pressure medicine? No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that we know that things like our pets, petting a dog or a cat, our hugs from our grandchildren and our children and our friends, those things help to regulate our bodies. Yeah. And so we know that happens. We know that things like hugs increase serotonin and dopamine and neuropinephrine and all those good brain chemicals. So if we know that, then we have to know that relationships are important. God literally designed my body to respond to other people. My hormones and my chemicals will literally fluctuate. My heart rate will literally change. And we know that. We know that if somebody is in tremendous pain and their spouse is able to come into the room, our friend that has the husband that's been with the COVID, when he was being monitored, when she would step into the room and he would hear her voice, even under total sedation, all of his stuff changed. His stuff started coming down a little bit because even though he was in so much pain and everything, hearing her alone, even before she even touched his hand or anything, would make those things start to regulate a little bit better. And so it matters. We respond to one another, and we have to remember that. If we remember how much of an impact it has, are we going to hug people more? Are we going to make sure as grandchildren that we get by and see those grandparents? My husband is the best in the world. When his grandparents were alive, when we were dating, every single time that we came home to see his parents, we would make it around to both grandmothers too, every single time. And it wasn't a quick pop-in visit. I mean, we would sit and work puzzles, we would play rummy, we would do whatever it was that the grandmas liked to do. And he always made sure of it, even when he was so busy as a student and with Army things and, dating me. We would always do that. And I always admired that about him so much, because lots of grandsons especially can't always be counted on to do that. And when he couldn't be home, he called and he would talk to them on the phone. And usually, if he called, he would usually call like twice a month. But so it usually amounted to at least 2 phone calls a month and 1 visit a month. And that was in the midst of all this busyness, but it mattered to him. And so he did it. And so I think that's so important. And when we give those kind of examples to other people, but I know how much that it meant to both of his grandmas. And we were there when both of them passed away. So we were able to do that. And I have one set of grandparents still living, and we do what we can to get there. A lot further away from us because they live in Botetourt, so they're like an hour and a half away. But we do what we can to get and see them and take the kids and get to see them so that they can see their great-grandkids. And those are I only have one set of grandparents still living. Jonathan doesn't have any still living now. But we try to make sure that we do that. And it's important and it's valuable. And COVID has messed that up for so many people, because for a while my grandparents are older and we had to not be able to see them and things for a while. But anyway, we can do that for other people, and we should do that for other people. We have to be people that do that. So she says on page 51, is there ever a time when somebody reached out to connect with you and you just didn't get it? You didn't understand, why is this person trying to reach out to me? You didn't understand their attempt. Has that ever happened to anybody? Yeah. So what do we do with attempts like that? If we think, wow, I don't really have much in common with this person, but she's reaching out to me, do you just ignore them? Do you rebuff their attempt? Or do you actually try to meet it?
My instinct is to pull away.
To pull away. Okay. So,
I'm being honest.
yeah. And I think that's an instinct that a lot of people would have.
Well, it was someone here said something nice, and we need to get together. I have to get together so much, and I didn't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And even when I was in the hospital, that person came to see me.
No.
And now I feel ashamed, but I'm getting together a lot.
Yeah. Well, I believe very much, Jonathan and I are both students of history. He was a history major, I wasn't, but we've studied a lot of periods of history. And I believe very, very strongly and firmly that we are at a distinct disadvantage in the modern America, because throughout most of history, even if you lived in an urban area, in a city, like ancient Rome, and you're right in Rome, you still had more connection than we have today. They're in all points of history that you can possibly point to. And you know what they weren't thinking? How much do I have in common with this person? They weren't looking at things like that, because that's kind of a first world luxury that we have today. Before, if women were going to the well to gather water, all of the women were going to the well to gather the water, and they were all going to talk to each other. If they were of a certain age and they were the ones that the family sent to gather the water, they were going to be there every day. And so it did not matter if this one was this way and this one was this way. They were all going to be talking because they were all there. It took time to fill all of those jugs and do all of that. And it's the same. If you were the only blacksmith in town, how many of the other men were you going to talk to? All of them, because they were all coming to see you for their needs. So I think that there was more of a village component, even in bigger places in the past, than what we have today. Because today we don't know our next door neighbors. We don't know who's across the street. Even if we might know their names, we still don't know so much about them, because people are a lot, I guess, different in some ways than they were before. And so we have all this privacy that we layer around ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with privacy and expecting to have some privacy and things. But the point is that people were more intertwined with each other before. They would have known each other very well. How did school teachers used to live? They lived by living in the different families. They would move from house to house and stay with different families while they were teaching for that school year most of the time, because the school couldn't offer room and board most of the time. And so that's how that teacher would live. How well do you get to know someone if you live with them for an entire month and you're sitting at all of the meals of the day with them and things? And we just don't have situations like that today. I was speaking to my dental hygienist the other day. Her son just went to Virginia Tech, and he is a junior. He did his community college and transferred, and he's on the autism spectrum, so he has some social interaction issues anyway. But anyway, he's not very happy just yet because he feels like he doesn't have a connection with any people. Now, his grandparents live in Blacksburg, so he's doing good because they're able to get him some even-ins. But he just kind of is like, I don't know anybody in my classes, and I haven't gotten to know my roommates in my apartment very well. So she's trying to encourage him. It takes time. It takes longer than living there for a month and a half before you're going to have this kind of thing. But anyway, it's different than it used to be. And so we have to remember that we do have that disadvantage. We have to work harder to form relationships. We have way more distractions than ever before, right? we have 24/7 news, and we have our phone at the touch of our hand. We can be totally distracted if we want to and live only online and not live in reality very much. And so if we remember all of those things, then that'll help us to make sure that sometimes we do put our phone down and we talk to the person in front of us. And for some people that phone thing isn't as big of an issue, but I know some people listening, it can be a big issue. It can be a temptation. And so we have to make sure that it isn't for us as Christians, right? Because that's not gonna help us to make the kind of connections that we should be making. So she says then the next question, describe a time when someone gave you advice to set you straight. Did you accept their advice graciously, or did you resist it? When someone's telling you how wrong you are and how you need to be doing something way different than you're doing, do you usually say, thank you so much for pointing that out to me. I'm going to change that right away today. Or do we usually resist what they're saying a little bit?
It has made me mad.
Yeah, it can.
But then, as I think about it, I'm glad they said it because it helps me.
Well, does it matter what kind of relationship that you have with the person who says it to you?
Yes.
Are you going to take it a little bit differently from your spouse than you would from somebody that barely ever speaks to you at the church building, right? It matters if we have that relationship there, because sometimes we can say something hard to somebody that is close to us, you know?
And it depends on how it's said.
It depends on how it's said. Did they say it with harshness, or did they speak gently? Are they trying to tell you, I told you so, I'm right and you're wrong? Or are they legitimately trying to say, I've noticed this thing, right? So we have to be careful when we're doing things like that. I have a friend, and she posted the other day, this goes along with that question. I know I'm telling a lot of stories today, but her husband had several tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he was injured really badly on one of his tours. He's had all kinds of pain and all kinds of struggle, and he has PTSD because of his experiences there. And they've had a hard time, just a really hard time sometimes. And he had taken to drinking more than he should, just to kind of deal with the pain and things. Well, she told him, can't be doing that. She's like, I can understand your pain and everything, and I can help you. I can understand when you're cranky with me, but we have a son, we have a child, and he's watching his dad. And her husband did not appreciate this when she very first said it to him, but she had said it gently. She had said, we love you too much to watch this become a bigger problem than it is, and I want you to go, and I want you to do something about it. Well, he was already in counseling, so he started talking to them. Well, he found one of the AA groups, and he started going. Well, anyway, he has now been for one whole entire year not drinking a single drop of anything. And it never had become a huge problem for him, because she right away was like, I can't, this our child, because their son is 12, I think. And so she's like, he's watching you. He's seeing how to handle his problems when he's grown, and this isn't how we do it. And so anyway, her husband had gotten her flowers the other day because he wanted to tell her thank you for saying that hard thing to him that she knew he was not going to react well to. And I thought that post was so sweet. They've had a really good marriage in spite of all of the struggles, because she is such an amazing person, and she has been there for him really just in ways that other wives don't need to be there for their husbands. And so I loved to see that he's doing so good right now. And her husband actually had just had COVID just a couple months back, and he ended up in the hospital for a few weeks he didn't need the ventilator, but he did need oxygen support. I think he was there for 3 weeks, and that poor friend, her mama, was in the hospital with COVID at the same time, 2 different states. So she was trying to get updates on the one and be there for the other and still take care of her son and everything all in the midst of it. But so I loved to see the update about him giving her flowers and her having a much easier, better time these weeks. But it matters. It matters the relationship we have. It matters how we say something. And I can't think of too many harder things that you need to say to somebody than something like that. And yet she managed it in a way that had him seek help and listen to her instead of resisting. So
she did it with love.
Yeah.
Some people do it with hatred.
Yeah, she did. And she didn't threaten him and give ultimatums and all of this. She didn't say, well, I'm leaving you tomorrow if you don't. She didn't do any of that. And as a result, he was able to hear her instead of to not hear her, because sometimes people don't hear what we're saying because of the way we've said it. It's hard to hear somebody if all they can hear is the criticism and the harshness and the tone that's there and things like that. So she said, describe a time when someone expressed an appreciation for you. Do we ever have anybody that says, I just appreciate you so much? Do we express our appreciation for other people just for being them? Does it even matter? Does appreciating other people matter? Is it something that causes any kind of value? Now, one thing that I think of, because I was just bad-mouthing all of the way that it's hard today, one thing I think makes it easier today than in previous history is we have birthdays and Valentine's and Christmas. We have Grandparents' Day. We have all these days built into our calendar to literally heap appreciation and show someone how much we love them. And do it in sincere, gentle ways, right? We have these days to remind us, oh, I have an anniversary. And so I can say to my husband every year on this day, I'm so thankful to be married to you and not to somebody else. And people didn't have that in the past. The days didn't mean quite the same thing. Certainly no one was going to celebrate some of those kinds of days. And today we have those built-in reminders to do it. And so that's something really special about being alive today. I think we can take the good parts about modern times and embrace them, make sure that we appreciate them so well. So it is important, right, to express appreciation, to express gratitude, to express thankfulness, to express tender affection. When we're fond of someone, we say it. Because sometimes if we don't say it, it might be too late to say it. Now, if somebody is a person that's trying to set you straight, and you have another person that's telling you how much they appreciate you, which person do you probably appreciate more? Are you going to go with the one that's always setting you straight and telling you how it is? Or are you going to try to go with the one that's like, I just appreciate you so much as a person? The attitude that we have matters. Our attitude is most of what we do, right? People can go through horrible things, but their attitude can make it so much better. I think I've told this story before. We had a really dear friend at Westside, and she had cancer. She had had it as a teenager, got it again as an adult, got it again as an adult. So she was on her third bout, and she had just struggled for years, had all sorts of health issues from it. Well, one day, it was ladies' class on a Sunday morning. We were meeting in the fellowship hall, and her husband wheeled her in, and he helped her. He spread out all these quilts and things and laid her down on one of the sturdy tables like this. She wanted so badly to be there. And she didn't feel good when she was just sitting up, because wheelchairs aren't very comfortable, especially if you don't have one that's adapted to your body. And so just sitting there for so long was just so hard for her. So she would lay with us so she could be with her Christian sisters. She didn't want to stay shut in at home. If the doctor had said that she was well enough to be around people without risking infection and things, then she wanted to be at the church building with her church family. And that impressed me so much because I can't even imagine the kind of pain that she was in. And to have your husband make soft, like, I mean, because he had like a whole bag, because he'd have to spread down like 3 big old thick comforters just for her to be able to lay on the table reasonably comfortably. And he had a pillow and he would cover her up, and she would just lay there on her side and she would listen. She didn't feel really well enough to talk a lot, but she would listen. And it mattered to her when we would pray for her before that class. It just made her feel good. And she did that, and her granddaughter went to church there too. And she saw her grandma do that every time. Going to the church building and being with God's family matters. And that granddaughter still understands that that matters. She died, but the impact that she had on her family certainly didn't. Her legacy is very much so still there. So our attitude matters. The way we react to things, the way we react to other people, it all matters so much. So we'll go ahead and get started on page 52 because I do have a few minutes yet. So she is talking on page 52, the characteristics that you have to have in order to connect with other people. Emotional availability. Availability means able to be used, able to be obtained. If you're available to someone else, then they can obtain you. It means they can pick up the phone and call you and know that you're going to be there. And you're going to be there emotionally. You're not just going to be, just listening to them because you have to. You're going to be listening and responding. You're going to be doing that active kind of listening. A degree of flexibility. When we have flexibility, then we're willing to change. We're willing to compromise. We're willing to modify what we do to suit somebody else's needs. Flexibility and rigidity are something that on the autism spectrum people have a lot of trouble with. So we have worked a lot in our house with the medical teams working with our boys to be able to be more flexible, to be able to do things in a different way than what that routine looks like that they want it to look like. Because sometimes there has to be some flexibility, right? We can't do very well in life if we can't be flexible. And so we've had to work on that. We have to work on trying to learn to be more flexible in circumstances. But everybody needs to be able to do that. Consistency. When we have consistency, we have a firmness of constitution. It means that we don't change with the wind. We don't blow this way and that way. We stay the same. And somebody can predict how we're going to act and how we're going to talk and how we're going to be. Another thing that David Arendado said that people need to form these relationships are a range of emotions. I looked up range of emotion. It's actually very interesting. Scientists believe there are about 34,000 different emotions, which really surprised me. And some of them are not ones that you would want to have, like mania. We wouldn't actually want to have manic behavior, but it does count as an emotion. But the psychologists have developed this wheel that's a wheel of emotions. There are 8 primary emotions, and they're things like joy, anger, disgust, trust. I can't remember what all the other ones are. Sadness, grief. So those are the primary ones, and then other emotions kind of go off of that. So we know that there's a difference between profound grief and feeling a little bit sad. And so there are different words that mean different levels. There's a difference between the great joy you might have on your wedding day or at the birth of a child compared to happiness that you might feel because you got an extra $50 on your check at work, And so there are that's what the range of emotion means, that we're capable of seeing here and here. We don't have to have just one level. We don't immediately get angry with a short fuse every single time we're not enraged, right? Sometimes we're irritated. We're a little bit mad, but we're not really mad. And so we have that range of emotion. And we have to, as human beings, experience negative emotions and our positive emotions, right? It's not okay as people to ignore negative emotions. People who ignore every bit of sadness and anger that they feel, what's going to happen to them? We have to release some of that. And so we have to do it in a godly way if we're Christians. But we know, I mean, I can pull out my Bible and I know examples where Jesus was angry. And I can see where he acted and did not sin in his anger. So I know that it is okay for me to feel anger as well, especially if you're feeling it in a situation where it is right, where it is just.
To be angry about.
Right. And so we can't just pretend like those things don't exist. That's having a range of emotion. We have to be able to acknowledge, I have depression right now. And I need to see what I need to do. Do I need to do medication? Do I need to see a counselor and speak to them? Is it the kind of depression where maybe it's because of a situation and I need to talk to good friends that I can value and trust? Maybe I don't need medication right now, but I need to do something. It's not enough to just ignore it. And so that's the range of emotions. He said we need a capacity for playfulness. Right? It can't be all work and no play in relationships. We have to have some ability to do lighthearted things, to value amusement with those other people. If you had a marriage that didn't have any playfulness in it, then what are you going to have? I mean, if you never do anything together, like take a walk or watch a movie or whatever you do, bird watch, whatever it is, you're not going to be spending that kind of time with somebody. You can't constantly be doing nothing but the hard. You have to do things like that. He says we need the initiation of affectionate interaction, warm regard, loving tenderness, fondness, that kind of appreciation for people like that. We have to have a sense of humor. We have to be able to laugh at ourselves. We have to be willing to laugh at ourselves sometimes. We have to not take life too seriously, even though life is a serious business. People who laugh are much happier than people who don't, right? Again, laughter makes those chemicals in your brain like serotonin go way, way up. And we can see, they can literally look at your brain scan and watch it happen. So it is not a question of whether it happens, it's a question of it does happen and I need to figure out how to laugh more. And patience is the last thing he said there. Do we accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset? That's a big question. Do we do those things? So we have to ask ourselves these things. Am I a potential good friend? Am I emotionally available, or am I completely withdrawn when I'm around other people? Am I isolated emotionally? Do I have walls so high, gates so locked that no one can get in? And a lot of people do. Do I have trust issues so much that I won't trust a single person, no matter how trustworthy that they've proven themselves to be? Is my sense of what is acceptable rigid or flexible? Do I accept if my friend's having a bad day? If my friend walks in and she snaps at me because she's had a bad morning with her children, maybe she had a very, very hard situation, and then she comes in and she says something unkind to me. Do I just write her off? Well, I'm never being friends with her again. People do. They do that all the time, and they do it even with family relationship. There are sisters that have never spoken another word to each other after some tiny little argument like that. Those things happen. But am I that person? Am I going to be flexible and say, oh, I bet she's having a hard morning this morning. I'm going to give her a little bit of space, and in a few minutes I'll talk to her and see if she'll tell me what the morning has been like, or something like that. Am I obsessive compulsive about my time and my opinions? Mine. Is only my time important, or only my opinions important, or am I flexible with them? We don't have to change our opinions, but can I accept that my friend has a different opinion than me? Can I still be friends with someone who doesn't share every opinion that I have? I hope so, because I think I probably have a lot of different opinions, even from just people in this room. I mean, just about different things. Do we like different things? Do people enjoy? Some people love to go for walks. Some people hate to go for walks. But can those two people still be friends? Sure.
Well, what kind of world would it be if everybody was,
Yeah. Am I relatively consistent regarding my values and standards? Or do I change depending on who I'm with? Do I not mind drinking with my work friends, but with my church friends, I would never order anything at the restaurant? A lot of people aren't consistent. And then their other friends don't know what to think. They don't understand, like, oh, she just changes her mind depending on which group of people that she's with. That doesn't make you a very consistent person, but that's how a lot of people react. So she says here, consistency allows others to predict how you'll behave in a given circumstance. And consistency is what makes people decide whether they can trust us or not. Consistency is so important. So we will start on page 54 the next time, talking about trust some more. And so for now, we will be done, but we will start on page 54 the next time. Thanks, ladies.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. But my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you'd reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Over every thought, over every word, may my life reflect the beauty of my Lord. 'Cause you mean more to me than any earthly thing. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? You are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me